The Babylon Project was our last best hope for Scott. A self-contained podcast, 1 hour long, located on the internet. A place of fun and discussion for Babylon 5 fans everywhere. A shining beacon in cyberspace, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5, the year the Great War to free Bab 5 came upon us all. This is the story of the last of the Babylon podcasts. The year is 2014. The name of the place is the Babylon Project Podcast. The host of the Babylon Project podcast, Jim Arrowwood and Raul Wybera.
Hi, this is Jim and Raul, and you are listening to the Babylon Project podcast. How are you doing tonight, Jim?
Doing real well. Ready to go for this.
Me too. It has been such a crazy week. Actually, it's been a crazy 2 weeks. I've had my whole family sick. I've had computer breakdowns. I've had all kinds of craziness in life, so this is one of the things that actually let's sit here and have some fun.
I'll tell you what, with the end of basketball season at school, my life has gotten quite a bit simpler.
I've got about another week to go before Simple starts, and once that happens, then things will be much better.
Then we're going to have some boom?
Then we're going to have some boom.
Boom.
I hope.
No boom today.
Yeah, but definitely tomorrow. So tonight we are going to be talking about the second episode of Season 1, Soul Hunter.
Yes.
Now.
What do you say about Soul Hunter? It's not one of my favorite episodes.
And I've actually had some issues with it as well. I think probably our best bet would be for you to give us a summary of the episode. That way we can get everyone on the same page, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, here we go.
Archive. Access. Initiated.
A capital ship has arrived at the station, and passengers are disembarking for Babylon 5. Sinclair and Ivanova welcome the new medical officer, Dr. Stephen Franklin. Franklin tells them how he visited with Dr. Kyle on the Io station and how Kyle is looking forward to serving the EarthGov with the president. Sinclair receives a call that there is a disturbance in the jump gate near the station. An unidentified ship exits the jump gate. It seems to be out of control and on a collision course with Babylon 5. Sinclair takes out a fighter and with difficulty manages to grapple the unidentified ship and bring it into the docking bay. Delenn catches up with Sinclair in the corridor. They discuss the ship and the passenger. Sinclair explains that he is unfamiliar with the species. Delenn offers to help with identification, and Sinclair gladly accepts. Dr. Franklin attempts to help the patient when Sinclair and Delenn enter. Delenn apparently knows who or what the stranger is. She calls the stranger Shock Tot, and then she grabs Garibaldi's weapon in an attempt to shoot the stranger. Sinclair disarms Delenn, and she insists that Sinclair should kill the stranger by the most convenient method available. She goes on to tell him that he is a soul hunter, and he must be put off the station before someone dies. Sinclair doesn't understand. In Delenn's quarters, she explains the details about the soul hunters. She tells a chilling tale about how they steal and imprison souls and they have a particular interest in Minbari souls. In the down below part of the station, a man is running a shell game. In the med lab, the soul hunter shows signs of life. Meanwhile, Sinclair, Ivanova, and Garibaldi discuss how there seems to be an awful lot of ships leaving the station in a big hurry. Sinclair says that they have probably gotten word about the soul hunter being on the station. The shell game continues. One of the players becomes angry when he discovers that the man running the game is cheating. The gamer flees with the player in pursuit with a knife. In MedLab, the soul hunter stands up and describes the feeling of the gamer, and we see the gamer stabbed by the player. Security is alerted and the gamer is taken to MedLab. As Dr. Franklin attempts to treat the gamer, the soul hunter describes the feeling of the gamer as he dies. Sinclair and Franklin attempt to interrogate the soul hunter, who only sits repeating some chant over and over again. Finally, when Sinclair says that the soul hunter is a stealer of souls, the soul hunter reacts by explaining that they are not thieves, but rather they work to preserve souls. He goes on to explain that they are drawn to the moment of death, and then they collect the souls of very special people. He further explains that they tried to collect the soul of Dukat, the Minbari leader that was killed during the Earth-Minbari War. Sinclair tells him that he may stay on the station only so long as he needs to heal. Then he has to leave. The soul hunter continues his chanting. The dead gamer's body is committed to deep space because his family cannot afford to have him sent home. Delenn goes to the med lab to talk with the soul hunter. She tells him that she knows that he has a collection of souls on his ship. She further tells him that she will find his collection and set them free. He tells her that he knows she was one who was present when the soul of the Minbari leader Dukat was lost. Then he muses on why she, who holds the title Sitai, a member of the Grey Council and leader of the Minbari, is serving as an ambassador on the station. Delenn leaves. The soul hunter fakes an injury, and when the guard in MedLab attempts to check on him, the soul hunter overcomes him and takes his weapon. The soul hunter realizes now why he has been brought to the station. Sinclair and Garibaldi discuss where the soul hunter might be expecting to escape to. Sinclair says that they are drawn to death and that someone is about to die, and Ivanova says they need to figure out exactly who is about to die. The soul hunter goes into the alien sector and meets with an insectoid named Nagrath. The soul hunter tells him that he needs to know all about the secret passages and ways on and off the station. Nagrath tells him it will be expensive, but the soul hunter is on a mission, and a soul will be lost if he doesn't act. Ivanova is informed that another unscheduled ship is coming through the gate. The gate opens, and another soul hunter ship enters Babylon 5 space. Sinclair contacts the ship and asks why the new soul hunter wants to come on board the station. The hunter tells him he is there to see Sinclair before it is too late. The first hunter overcomes another guard as the second comes on board the station. He is met by Sinclair and Garibaldi. The hunter explains that the first hunter is deeply disturbed and that he is going to take a soul, and the person whose soul he will take will die at the hands of the first soul hunter. While Delenn takes care of some diplomatic business, the first soul hunter enters Delenn's quarters and informs her that he will save her soul at any cost. Meanwhile, the second soul hunter continues to explain that the first saw too many souls lost during the Earth-Minbari War and stopped waiting for the death of people he intended to preserve souls from. The soul hunters have been trying to stop him for some time, and they had almost captured him 2 days prior to his arrival on Babylon 5. Garibaldi receives a message that a guard in the ambassadorial level of the station has been stunned, and Sinclair realizes that Delenn is in danger. Delenn is strapped to a table, and the first soul hunter prepares to take her soul as an atonement for his failure to collect ducats. He turns a device on her that will capture her soul. She struggles, but to no avail. Sinclair, Garibaldi, and the second hunter hurry to Delen's quarters only to find them empty. They walk over to a map of the station and ask the hunter to locate where Delen is, since he can sense impending death. He does find her, and Sinclair finds and interrupts the first soul hunter. They exchange weapons fire, and the soul hunter is wounded but continues to fight. The soul hunter informs Sinclair that Delen is Setai and that she is using him. Sinclair turns the soul hunter's machines on the hunter and captures his soul. Delen awakens and is taken to MedLab. As she recovers, she utters that they were right about Sinclair, but no clarification is given. In his quarters, Sinclair asks the computer to translate the word Setai. It tells him that the word means Grey Council, the ruling body of the Minbari. Sinclair sees the remaining soul hunter off the station, informing him that Babylon 5 is henceforth off limits to all soul hunters. The hunter asks what happened to the collection from the first hunter. Sinclair simply tells him that life is full of mysteries. In the final scene, Delen releases the souls collected from captivity.
Initiating plot analysis.
Thanks, Jim. That was an excellent summary.
Thanks.
I did notice a new name in your description, and that was Dr. Stephen Franklin.
Yes. We got introduced to our permanent doctor, Dr. Franklin, who came on a huge capital ship.
Yes, and that one, you notice the spinning section on it to provide artificial gravity, at least on the outer rings?
Yes.
Yeah, that tends to be something we'll see with a lot of the human ships. They use rotating sections for that artificial gravity, even on the ships, not just the station.
Right.
And he made a comment that he ran into Dr. Kyle, which would be the original doctor from The Gathering on the flight, and that Kyle is now working directly for President Santiago.
Yes. And Franklin says that's a great thing because with all the aliens that are relocating to Earth and going there to visit, it'll give him a chance to research and learn more about them.
That's the only real main cast change, regular cast change added at this point, I believe.
At this point, yes.
And I think there's maybe one more to add still. Lanier?
Yes, Lanier will be along in a couple of episodes.
And we did have two guest stars in this show tonight.
Yes.
William Shepard.
Yep, as the first soul hunter, and then also John Snyder as a second soul hunter. Both are Trek alumnus. Just thought I'd throw that in. William Shepard, you would probably recognize if you're a Trekkie. He was Data's grandfather. And I can't remember the name of the episode. And he was also the head of the Vulcan Council that talked to Spock when Spock turned down his membership to the Vulcan Science Academy.
Yes.
And then John Snyder was a politician on an episode where the city there was a city in a dome, and the dome supposedly cracked, and the Enterprise crew went to repair it. And of course, that was one of my least favorite Trek episodes. Anytime Troy falls in love, I don't enjoy it. So, enough Trek, though.
I actually remember the William Shepard episode. I don't remember the John Snyder, so I think that says it all right there. Yep.
So, anyway, those are... But they played a lot different roles on this show.
Yes, and I will say this. We've both said this wasn't our favorite episode, but William Shepard gave a brilliant performance.
Yes.
I mean, he was just plain creepy.
Yes, absolutely creepy. It was the creepiest part was when he was sitting there in MedLab and chanting, Sito, Richo, Monto, Re, over and over and over.
You sound exactly like him there too. That is awesome.
I rehearsed that just so that I could do that.
Oh my! Even though there were a lot of parts about the episode that we didn't necessarily like, in a way, it was an important episode. Like you and I had discussed before, this really gives a lot of background, basic material, exposition on the Minbari, actually.
Yeah, we get a glimpse into a little bit of their political structure. We find out that Delenn is not all that she appears to be. We learn about the leader of the Minbari, a guy named Dukat, which, it kind of, I got to wonder about this, throw this in right now. The leader of the Minbari was Dukat, and on
Correct.
Deep Space Nine, there was Gul Dukat. Probably just a coincidence, but something I thought I'd throw in there.
Interesting. I think that was probably a coincidence. But yes, we do learn that we'll know him more as the Grey Council,
Yes.
as the Minbari ruling body that exists,
Mm-hmm.
and we learn that the members of the Grey Council, their title is Satai,
Right.
and that Delenn is actually a member of this Grey Council.
Yes. And what is she doing on a space station as an ambassador rather than being at home doing her duties? And that'll be something interesting to uncover as time goes on.
Right, and I like the way Sinclair described that. It's like sending the vice president
Yes.
of the Earth Alliance.
Yes.
That actually ends up being a key plot element of the series as well. We do learn a little more about the Minbari as well. Physiologically, they are tough. They are very tough.
Yes.
Franklin comments that the damage that Delenn took at the end when being held captive by the Soul Hunter would have killed any human.
Yeah. We find out that their blood is the same color as ours.
It is red.
And she had lost quite a bit and still survived. So, yeah. Of course, that could be Dr. Franklin's brilliant ministering pulling her through, too,
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't as if she just walked away from it. She was in pretty tough shape.
Oh, yes. And she said some things that made Sinclair think a little bit. But what's really amazing about Sinclair is he is really being patient with it. There at the end he says there's time. There's plenty of time. When he finds out what Satai means. So,
in fact, you'd almost think his attitude and approach is almost Minbari-like.
Yes.
Definite confidence that it'll reveal itself in time.
Yes. He seems to be a patient man in some ways. In others, he's not so patient.
Yes. Back in a Star Fury again.
Yes.
To do that capture of the ship. Why him and not another pilot? You would think you could get another pilot into the Cobra Bays and out in a Star Fury a lot faster.
Well, I would imagine like any other situation where you're launching craft, there would be at least one standby fighter at all times.
Yeah. That would be true. Or a patrol craft. Well, it's more of a diplomatic, so maybe they might be a little less likely to have an armed ship fluttering around, but...
Well, maybe not out in the open, but... And then again, in order to capture the Soul Hunter's ship, why didn't they send an automated bot to do it?
I can come up with at least a theory, if we do a little theorizing. The maneuver, that kind of a maneuver itself is probably a little more difficult to try and do remotely or via drone.
Yeah, it could be.
So I think that might have a little something to do with it. While I was researching this, though, I did find out one of the things that really just frosted me, this weekend, last week. Gee, as soon as there is any chance for action, Sinclair doesn't hesitate to jump into a Star Fury.
Yeah.
For the commander of the station, that just seemed a little out of line. Joe Straczynski did provide an answer to this.
Okay.
In Earth Force, it works very much the same way as Air Force in one respect, and that's on promotion. Promotion in the Air Force is tied to your combat experience,
Mm-hmm.
and in this case, combat flying. Remember, Sinclair's a combat pilot,
Right.
so he has to get in the cockpit every chance he gets
Mm-hmm.
to maintain his rating, to be able to advance and to get promotions, and as well as to maintain things like combat pay.
Mm-hmm.
So just because he's in a diplomatic mission doesn't mean he's not bound by the same kind of drawbacks of the military structure in that regard.
Right.
So that's the reason why he's getting away with. I'm sure the desire would be there regardless, but the reason he gets away with it is that it's necessary for to maintain his status and advance his rank.
I can sympathize with the guy, though. About a month ago, I got a new car, and I love every opportunity I can get in that machine and go for a drive. I really enjoy it, So I can see where he's coming from. What did you think about all the time it took to capture that ship?
At the end there, that was the longest 10 seconds I've ever seen.
Oh,
trying
my
to do
goodness.
that lock on.
Did you happen to time it by any chance?
I did, and I think it was closer. This is off of memory. I think it was closer to 20 seconds when they gave that 10-second warning.
Okay.
But some of the gaps before that were a little short. I think it got dinked around a bit with the editing.
Yeah.
One thing I have to admit I did like about that locking onto the ship segment was the way it really just emphasized that we're talking about Newtonian physics.
Mm-hmm.
Matching the rotation, matching the vector. And I don't know about you, but that spot where you're looking out Sinclair's cockpit into space, you see the Soul Hunter's ship, and then you see everything else just wheeling madly about you. Was almost enough to make me queasy.
Okay, yeah, the vertigo thing.
Uh-huh.
Yep, I've experienced that once or twice.
Another thing that got introduced to us very quickly, I think, was a much better view of Brown Sector down below.
Not all of humanity is doing real well. There's a lot of people that are indigent.
Complete underclass, obviously a criminal element in the station.
Yeah.
This is one area where they had a real departure from the kind of future you see in Star Trek. And I think this was probably one of the first that I remember seeing something like Down Below in sci-fi.
Well, I can't think of anything right now that would be comparable. However, to be fair, Star Trek was not about.
No, it wasn't, and it's not intended as it was not intended as a criticism. Just there's a reflection of real life. There's a reflection of some grittiness,
right?
That you start to see that has become so common today in a lot of science fiction.
Well, there's an economy that exists in Babylon 5 that is absent from Star Trek.
Very, very true.
Because Picard states that being human is no longer about acquiring wealth. It's about improving ourselves. So it sounds like there's a whole different economy, while, of course, the Federation's going to have to trade with other races. There has to be some kind of economy going on. But in Babylon 5, it would seem that the economy that we have now is being extended into the future.
And speaking of economy, mentioned that criminal element and that black market economy. We did get another character introduced, but not as necessarily a name. It was more of a animatronic, and that was Nagrath.
Nagrath, yes. Nagrath was in the pilot and came back for this one, but I don't recall seeing him any other time during the...
He will be in and out through the first season.
Okay.
You know, I didn't think he looked too bad on screen, but Straczynski really didn't like it. He didn't like the way it just worked out and played through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big part of the reason why he didn't come back in season 2.
Okay. I can understand, though, why Straczynski would not care for something like that, probably because it would be so difficult for McGrath to show any kind of emotion of any kind or expression or anything. An awful lot of what goes on Babylon 5, you'll notice that you'll get a look from an actor's face that'll give you an indication of many different aspects.
You know, that's very true. That is very true. Even with all the prosthetics, one of the things that was a concern was making sure that the actors could act through it.
Yes.
And here you've got essentially an oversized praying mantis with a translator box on his chest, so you can hear what he has to say.
Right. So you have no voice inflection, you have no body language, you have no facial expression to explain what is exactly going on behind this person's mind. And then I'm going to point out, kind of a minor spoiler, couple of episodes, the expression on a guest star's face is very indicative of being more involved in a situation than they're letting on.
Yes. We'll I know what you're getting to, and we'll definitely be getting to that. You know, one thing, Jim, I think even now that we're just on episode 2, that may almost become a regular is Ivana. How do you say Ivanova-isms? Does that work?
How about Ivanovisms?
In that Burial in Space, which, you know, my wife had mentioned, the eulogy that she gave struck her as profound, and I pointed out to her, you know, that is based on Naval Burial at Sea eulogy.
Yes.
But the discussion with Dr. Franklin on the insignificance, when he talks about how short human life is compared to the universe, and how minuscule we are in comparison. Ivanova's comment, we're Russian, we understand these things.
Yes. You know
just
what?
Hit.
I think we're going to have a section of the show in the future called Our Favorite Ivanovisms.
We'll have to keep that in mind. I think, listeners, let us know what you think. If you like the idea, we'll definitely be doing it, but she has a lot of them throughout the series. That is one of the things many people just loved about the show.
She has the best ones.
Yes, and also when Franklin makes the comment, is it always so busy? And her response was, yes, we like it that way.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it isn't as much what she says as how she says it.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so.
It would be difficult to capture that without actually playing it.
Well, let's go ahead and move on. It would hardly be possible to talk about an episode called Soul Hunters without actually discussing the Soul Hunters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As we've both said, they were just downright creepy.
Yes.
Even the one that didn't go bad, frankly, creeped me out.
Yeah. Well, he had a specific purpose, and he was definitely more social than the first Soul Hunter, but there was a reason for that, and that is because the first Soul Hunter had given up on just trying to be present to capture souls. He was going to help the process along a little bit.
Speed things up a bit. Yep.
Yes. And not take a chance on losing souls, because apparently Soul Hunter number 1 was present at Ducat's death.
Right. Sort of present. They kept him away.
Right. and Delenn has been accused of keeping the soul hunter away, and this is his way of, how did he put it, maintaining a balance.
Yeah, like I
So
said, creepy.
so he seems to feel that he is entitled.
Very, very much so. Enough so that he's been more or less cast out of the Brotherhood,
Yes.
and they're sending the other around to chase them down. The soul hunters themselves, Straczynski borrowed from Eastern mysticism. One of the things that my wife hadn't caught was that looked like a stone in the middle of their forehead.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with Eastern mysticism, but that represents the third eye, that
Yeah,
spiritual eye, that eye that sees under the spiritual plane.
right. And it, of course, is not structured the same as an eye. And a funny thing, while I was watching that episode just a little while ago, Diane made a reference to that. She said, "What is that? Is that supposed to be an eye?" And I said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a sensor that allows the soul hunter to see the electromagnetic spectrum in another way in order to see the soul leave the body and get all those senses that a normal set of eyes wouldn't get."
And Dr. Franklin would probably make an argument or make a discussion very similar along to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's, they bring up, this episode definitely gets into the metaphysical because it does struggle with the question of views on the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And Straczynski does not advocate one position or another. His purpose is to make you think.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that in this episode. There's three views on the soul. The one that you presented, that, and he does that, well, okay, if we took Aristotle's perspective on the soul, that it is the form or essence of any living thing. So just sort of that unifying what makes it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
In Franklin's case, I'm sure he would argue that it's more just an energy, some sort of electromagnetic field, and it's something that dies with the body.
Mm-hmm.
He introduces some of the Minbari religion in that it's something that is part of the universe that just recycles.
Mm-hmm.
The soul is something that recycles, and something that's important here. She emphasizes that when the soul hunter, if the soul hunter captures or steals the soul or destroys the soul, then the whole of the Minbari are diminished as a result.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be very important later on in the series.
Yes.
But we get the Minbari introduction there, and if you've studied theology, that is basically a pantheism. They're a pantheistic society, which means the whole universe itself is sentient.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, the whole universe is deity, and they'll explain that later on as trying to understand themselves, as the universe trying to understand itself.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the soul hunter perspective that is ephemeral. It's something that's going to pass away, that will die at death, but it can be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the soul hunters see their purpose to be. It's an interesting discussion. It's a good discussion. I really appreciate the way Straczynski does this without any sort of advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
He does it from a make you think. But that said, there's just, I don't know, there was something about the episode that didn't hang together well for me.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Now, for me, as an agnostic, it made me a little uncomfortable from that perspective. I'm not going to go into this that deeply. It's too much of a discussion to get into. But as an agnostic, is there such a thing? If there is, where does it exist? How can it exist outside of the body when the body is gone? Blah, 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 blah. I could go on for hours.
Right, and remember, Straczynski himself is agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be what led him to try to analyze that question.
Well, and as an agnostic, as opposed to being an atheist, we're open to possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you there are things that you know, there are things that you don't know, and if you're not open to knowing what you don't know, you'll never learn. So
That makes sense.
I can see where Straczynski is coming from with this is he doesn't know. So, what's wrong with exploring philosophically the question of all this? I
Oh
better
yeah,
shut
and
up now.
no, you're fine, because I mean, remember, I'm a Christian, but I'm also specifically as a Christian is I do see that I take, well, actually more of Sinclair's approach to the soul, which isn't explicitly stated, but there's some implication there because he's happens to be Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a particular fondness for apologetics. So
Mm-hmm.
a little more on the scholarly academic side where some of that's concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And I love delving into these questions like this. But there was something about it that just didn't hang together for me, and I haven't figured out what it is. And there's some episodes I just don't like. This was an episode I would have liked to like, but
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't hold together. And I know, the Soul Hunters actually ended up being a fairly popular alien
Yeah, they show up at other
at the time.
times.
They show up in one of the movies,
Mm-hmm. Well,
but
and then in the background, it's kind of funny. Now, Sinclair told him, "You aren't welcome here anymore when you're
uh-huh.
gone," but they still will show up in episodes in the background.
I'll have to watch for that.
I remember seeing it in various episodes. I don't remember which ones, but I do remember seeing them come back again.
I have not noticed that. I will definitely keep an eye open for that.
Right. And what's funny is when they are there, nobody seems to be uncomfortable about it, as they are in this episode, where apparently there is a mass exodus from the station. Once word gets out there's a soul hunter present.
Right. Well, I think part of if they are showing up, one of the things you get the impression of in general is that they're low key, hidden behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Take your choice on phrasings with it. So they show up, they're not going to be obvious about it.
Right. I would say waiting in the shadows, but we don't want to go there as far as Babylon 5 is concerned.
This all said, and I know we've dissed a little. Any particular, other than the difficult metaphysical question, likes or dislikes?
I liked the way that they made sure that everything in this episode was shrouded in kind of darkness. It was the lighting was very subdued in for most of the time, to keep the creepy kind of feel going with it.
Yeah,
I think that Straczynski, that's what he wanted. He wanted it to be a
he wanted
creepy
it to be
episode,
creepy.
and it definitely came through that way.
And I think in that regard, I said it was a creepy episode. I said it wasn't my favorite.
Hmm.
I didn't say it wasn't. I did not say that it was not successful.
Oh
I
yeah,
think he succeeded at what he was trying to do, whether it's the darkness, the depth of the metaphysical question, the exposition out of Ivanova. I think he succeeded at what he was trying to do. I'll definitely
yeah,
give him that.
yeah. And that's what I liked about it. What I disliked about it, I don't know. It just made me uncomfortable to watch a sci-fi show that was discussing metaphysics.
Oh, but bear in mind, metaphysic is anything that goes beyond that which is strictly physical.
Okay. See, and there again, I don't think I'm understanding the meaning of the word metaphysical.
if you get into math, if you get into logic, you're delving into metaphysics right there.
Okay.
If you're going outside, well, just one simple example. It doesn't come up so much in Babylon 5 as it does in a show like Fringe, but when you start hopping to parallel universes, for example, you when you get into the, well, that's strictly speaking because it's something that we can hypothesize, we can play with the math, but it's not really something that's a physical, testable element. You're getting into metaphysics.
Yeah, I see.
When you get into the big moral questions, the great moral questions, any sort of philosophy like that, you're getting into the metaphysic.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you think about it, science fiction is just thick dealing with the metaphysical questions.
Okay.
Because you're able to put yourself in a completely different environment, a completely different situation, and really just dig into those questions. Ursula Le Guin does that a lot. If you remember when we did the What is Science Fiction?
Mm-hmm. So what is a word I'm looking for then? Spirituality? I don't know.
Oh, gosh, that's another hard one. I mean, Larry Niven, the Mote in God's Eye.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the expedition to Mote was a Catholic priest. I mean, so much science fiction really digs into it. So, yeah, I know what you're saying. And, you know, it very well may be that the area of your discomfort as an agnostic and my area of discomfort as a Christian may actually be the same thing. It's just trying to figure out what is the word to put to it.
What is the word to put to that? Very good.
And it's not as if it's a matter of, difficult question, because I obviously, with the kinds of science fiction that you and I both like, tackling difficult questions is not a problem for either of us.
No, not at all. I just think it was the entire soul thing, you know, being used as a plot device. To think that you could capture somebody's essence like that. And the Babylon 5's not the only place this happens to me. Okay? When they start talking about Spock's katra.
Yes. I was going to say, what you're talking about here is not something that's exactly, it's not exactly a new concept to sci-fi. Spock's katra definitely is one.
Yeah. It there's instances like that it's like, well, yeah, okay. We needed this to advance the story. So I can handle that.
That might be part of what it is. Just, it is a rather profound, it is a rather deep metaphysical question, metaphysical discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is just used as a plot device.
Yes.
I wonder if that's part of it. It's a deep question that really gets a superficial treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is something, listeners, we would definitely love to hear some of your comments and feedback for this. There is one other thing that I particularly didn't like. This is more of a technical rather than a deep, profound question. Delenn at the end, when the Soul Hunter was trying to kill her,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, the foil cuffs and the vein tap was lame.
Yeah. It was, it definitely, well,
you notice they were never in the same position twice from one scene to the next? The
Yeah.
little aluminum foil, corrugated foil wraps.
Yes. Yes, I saw that. That looked not realistic. And then even when they zoomed into where supposedly Soul Hunter #1 had tapped into the vein, they had it very conveniently covered, and you could tell nothing was going on because her foot looked just fine. No bruising, no if someone's being exsanguinated, they're going to definitely show signs of it. And
even if you are Membari.
Yes. And even though their skin on, well, did you also notice, now that I think of it, that her skin tone on her foot looked very much human, while the Minbari face and hands look a little more pale.
Yes, I did know. I did notice that.
Okay.
That's just what I'll grant, though, that that's probably just one of those little continuity things.
Yeah. I guess there's got to be a plot hole every now and then.
Right. Speaking of plot, great segue, Jim. Great segue. Speaking of plot, what is Delenn planning? You would do such a thing? How is she using Sinclair? And then they also talk about who are they, and how are they right about Sinclair? Now, who are they, first of all?
They? That'll be up a little bit later. I'm not sure how to quite discuss this without.
We can spoil. We noted at the beginning of this podcast that spoilers can be discussed.
Right.
So,
well,
there's two possible theys.
Right. There would be, they know about Sinclair. The Vorlons know about Sinclair because in the Gathering, Entilza Valen.
Right.
So that would be one possibility who they are.
And the other possibility could be the Grey Council itself, because they interrogated Sinclair, and we do know, we'll see a little more specific about this in a few episodes, I think. I don't think we have to wait too long. But when they interrogate him, they bring the Triluminary into his presence, that that triangle with the little stone.
Right.
So they know that there's something very special about Sinclair as well. So which of the theys are they talking about? And is it just what the they themselves are planning, or is it just what the theys this episode refers to are planning, or is Delenn on her own agenda above and beyond all of that? You kind of follow what I mean? It's not a question that's answered, but it is stuff that's being laid out.
Right. Yeah. And how is she using Sinclair? She knows who Sinclair is eventually going to become.
Does she know who he's going to become, or does she just know that he's got a Minbari soul?
Well, if you remember down the road, the Minbari surrendered.
Right.
Within minutes of when they were going to win the war.
That was when they brought the Triluminary in front of Sinclair, and it glowed, which meant he had a Minbari soul.
Right.
And the absolute highest law of Minbar is that Minbari do not kill Minbari.
Not only that, though, didn't they discover that the souls were being recycled into humans? The Minbari souls were becoming human souls?
They knew that Minbari souls were coming to humans. I don't know that I don't remember if it was specific, if they knew any specifics. I'm sure they didn't know why. But they did know that Minbari souls were coming into humans. That was about it.
Okay.
So I don't think they necessarily knew who Sinclair truly was. I think it was only the Vorlons that truly knew that.
Ah. Okay.
And I think that goes down to the whole question of the One, which, the title that comes out later on throughout the Shadow War.
Right. The One, yes. I don't know. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does any of that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it all does. Well, we know where everything is going, but how this particular part ties in, who are the they, and what is Delenn planning?
Very much on. We definitely get the details of that as the series progresses. So, one last thing that I had in my notice as far as plot questions, things to watch for. Did you notice that Jakar, Londo, Talia, they weren't even in the episode?
Yeah, I know. And they were missed.
But this is what I had meant before when I mentioned that they only use a character when they're needed.
Right.
You don't just have a walk-in so you have screen time. If you're on screen, it's for a reason.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was during our diner hijack. You mentioned that the first time.
Yes, it was.
So.
Yes, it was. And then, in a lot of ways, that's still one of the big things that's, I wouldn't say unique about Babylon 5, but it's still pretty rare.
Well, I would imagine actors don't get paid if they aren't on the screen, so.
Well, no, actually, they get paid regardless. For a lot of these shows, you're contracted for this series, and you're contracted. You're getting a salary for that series.
Ah.
So at least on Babylon 5, I know for main cast, obviously supporting cast or secondary cast, that's a different story. But for main cast, you had your contract for so many episodes. How many episodes was in that season, and a price per episode. And because I remember Straczynski mentioning this before, it's not a matter of whether or not you're in the episode or not. We're still paying you. I remember at one point him commenting about getting a little pressure from the studio in that regard.
Oh.
Now, this is another thing. If I'm in error here, I'm sure someone out there would be more than willing to correct us, and I'll certainly acknowledge that.
Yeah. Well, if your focus isn't on Jakar, Londo, Talia, and others, then why would you want them in the episode?
Exactly.
All it does is raise questions maybe that you don't want to raise.
Or it distracts from the actual story you're trying to tell.
Oh, it definitely would. If you had Jakar and Londo sparring in the bar for 15 seconds during this particular show, it would have no meaning.
Right, and we'll get plenty of that in the next episode anyway.
Yes,
Born to
yes.
the Purple.
Yes.
Well, Jim, you know what? After sitting down and spending the last hour talking about this episode, first of all, I didn't think we would have that much to talk about. And second of all, I actually like this episode more now than I did when we started the conversation.
I did too. I found an appreciation for the episode when I watched it for the podcast. So, of course, I was paying a lot closer attention to what was going on. I was trying to get into the meanings and find the future references that would be coming up. So I did gain more of an appreciation for it.
Absolutely. I'm very much on the same page as you. Well, sir, do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really. I think we pretty well covered it, didn't we?
I think we did much more than I expected us to cover on this. So, other than the fact that there's no boom today,
there's always a boom tomorrow.
I think we can say good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep those cards and letters coming in.
Amen to that, guys. We really look forward to hearing from you. Have a great night.
Good night now.
Podcast terminated. Thank you for listening to the Babylon Project podcast. You can email Raul and Jim at the Babylon Project podcast @gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at the Babylon Project Podcast. On the internet, we are at babylonprojectpodcast.wordpress.com. To subscribe to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed on the webpage.